Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast to Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co host, Ed Carbajal. Weekly, we are brought to you by AllAccessMMA.com. Check out AllAccessMMA.com for our video podcast, MMA news, and MMA stories. My man, Ed, how's it going, brother?
Cool. Nice to have a little week off while you were over in Colorado. We had no podcast last week. Just a quick note for folks that are regular listeners. We're here this week and no podcast again next week because I have a lot of work to do with my other job. So um, no podcast next week, and then we should be back to our regularly weekly schedule after that. So that's why we haven't had any guests lately, just because of how broken up things are. But if you can't tell by my unshaved face and my tired eyes, being worked to the bone at my other job. But yeah, uh, I wish I was with you in Colorado because that literally was probably where all the great fights were happening. I mean, if you weren't paying attention to it, I'm not gonna lie, dude. Like, as far as one championship is concerned, I had casuals mentioning that event to me.
For the one championship, yeah, I had somebody at
Yeah.
work approach me about it. Multiple people actually approached me about it and mentioned Rod Tang, and
hmm
yeah, it was a hell of a week, man. It was a hell of a week. Before we jump into that, just so I don't forget, this Friday night, John Brumley goes for
Mm.
the Epic Fighting 170-pound championship amateur event out of San Diego, but one of the top tier events. He's actually headlining it on the poster, going for the world title. So it's available online at epicfightinglive.com. It's a $20 pay-per-view. It is amateur fighting, but it might be worth your money. It comes on at 8 o'clock Pacific time on Friday, so I think pretty much after Bellator and BKFC will have cleared out that Friday night. So if you're
hmm
looking for some late night entertainment, $20 to support the amateurs
Yeah.
and our buddy John Brumley,
Yeah.
hopefully coming back with the gold.
Yeah. Bellator card is early Friday, so that should work out for folks there. If you want to fill some fights for your Friday night, that's actually good. I'm glad you mentioned it.
So now, yeah, let's jump back to International Fight Week
Mhm.
2023.
Mhm.
Uh,
The real one.
the real one. Got out there Saturday morning. BKFC was Saturday evening. Um, cool arena, small, 7,000 seats. Basically just one giant bowl. Um, perfectly sized. I
So
mean,
the arena that was in was the same arena one used, right? For
correct. They had the exact
First
same
Bank Center.
arena
Yeah.
and roughly the same setup, other than one having a bigger and more extravagant stage.
Mm.
Um, nice size, not a bad seat in the house. Standing room only. I mean, you're talking every seat in the
Mm.
house sold for both events. BKFC had a few available the days prior, but by fight time, it was, there was lines for the bathrooms, lines for the beers, and every seat in the arena full. So,
And what a
um,
fucking card that was, huh?
man, it was fun. You
Like, I'm
know,
not even that into it, but like I literally like just I mean, even like, so you guys know I write for my MMA news, and my editor couldn't stop. I mean, talking about it. He it's just the stuff that I did see from it. I'm just like, I mean, it seemed unbelievable.
it really was unbelievable. I mean, it was unbelievable in a sense that it was you're watching bare knuckle fight, which this was my fourth live event, so I'm become kind of a veteran of,
Mhm,
I guess, going to these now.
mhm,
So it's not as shocking as the first time I was there, and it was like instant flashback to the '90s. But um, seeing the big names,
mhm,
cage side or not cage side, squared circle side, whatever they
mhm.
call it. Justin Gagey, Kamaru Usman, Pat Barry, Rose Namajunas. I mean, you start. It was
Yeah,
it was a
Connor was there.
Conor McGregor showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was the place to be on Saturday night.
How what was the vibe like when he showed up?
Oh, the place went nuts. The place went nuts. And it put a smile on my face. I
Mhm,
was laughing about it too, just because it's a big moment for bare knuckle to have somebody like that show up and lend more credibility to the average fight
mhm,
fan. I mean, yeah, you had a lot of people there who probably don't get to go to a lot of fights. Up until this little run in Denver,
mhm,
there really hasn't been event after event after event, despite being, the initial home of UFC one, and UFC two for that matter. Um, it really, I never really thought of it as the fight capital, but being there for the BKFC, like I said, crowd was hyped, crowd was into it. Um, Cool crowd, not you're not there's no, you don't feel like there's, even though you're at a violent event, you're not there's no it was cool, like it was just everybody was getting along, everybody was shooting the shit, everybody was just extremely ecstatic to see the fight card that was gonna happen, and then it
Mm-hmm.
kicks off. I mean, and and you get knockouts, 7-second knockout, and really all of it, the Ben Rothwell fight was the first fight where I was like, okay, big dudes are in town now, like, and they put together him and Copeland went at it, and you saw big dudes swinging and showing heart, and eventually Copeland's corner threw in the towel, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was taking his shots. The female fight was a little disappointing, because it had to be stopped due to a cut on Beck Rawlings.
Yeah, yeah. I actually the post event press conference, they both sat there together and they were amicable with each other, and um a rematch seemed to be welcomed by both women if they did it again. So I feel like when a fight gets stopped like that, I feel like that warrants a rematch.
I think it's bound to happen. And uh, Faria was doing her thing. She was probably going to win the fight. I mean, obviously she cut her, which means in the bare knuckle, especially, you're
Hmm.
landing something. But like I said, Connor was there in Beck's corner. So she had a little shot of adrenaline. It looked like as he walked into the ring during the ring announcements. Um, it was
Oh,
wild.
so they just let him do
It was
whatever he
surreal.
wanted
It
while
was
he was
surreal
there.
because it was, you just. I mean, Conor McGregor is obviously a huge worldwide star.
Yeah,
And it just, you just didn't expect it. It was the last thing in the world I expected, was to see him come around the corner of the
yeah. It seemed
ring.
like the UFC didn't expect it either because not only did he show up there and give them some love, but I mean, like people were speculating that'll be him because he's I love this game. I would absolutely love to do this. I
Of
mean,
course, he's
yeah.
gonna say that. Bare knuckle, I don't think has the money to that he would demand to do it.
Mm,
Maybe a few years down the line, if Connor goes through the ups and downs, financially,
mm.
um, we could see it. But I think the money's in MMA for Conor McGregor.
I
But
think he would actually do well there
oh,
too,
he'd do
though.
really well in it.
Yeah.
It's tailor made for him. I mean, it's really is. Speaking of tailor made, I mean, tailor made for Eddie Alvarez. I know Eddie Alvarez has a ground game and he used some of his wrestling in MMA, but the ferocity and everything is right up his alley.
Hmm.
Chad Mendes is somebody I didn't think it would he was known for his wrestling, kind of known as a wet blanket in
Yeah.
for a large portion of his career,
But
but
that's the thing about guys that come from wrestling. Like when they start getting halfway decent in striking, all that small twitch muscle explosiveness translate to power when they start
yeah, they're
throwing
so
hands. I mean,
strong. Yeah.
every wrestler winds up having knockout power and without even knowing it. So I wasn't too surprised, but I get that that's where a lot of people come from, even including myself. When you first hear Chad Mendes and BKFC.
I thought he'd have issues with reach, being a slightly
Hmm.
shorter fighter. I thought he made a little too stocky, maybe, which I thought maybe would be kind of bigger target. But I mean, he's built like a tank, and I mean, hits like a tank, and I mean that fight was that the arena was so excited. It was old school. It was
Hmm.
it was Gina Carano Cyborg. It was
Yeah.
like UFC has its moments. There's no BS in. We can promote all these other events. A huge fight in the UFC, there is
Hmm.
nothing like it. When there's 20,000 people in an arena, it's going off. There's just nothing like it. But for to be in a small arena when you're seeing something that really hasn't necessarily been seen before,
Yeah.
it's a different feeling, and to hear the place rocking, the crowd chanting the guys' names. I mean, it was just great. It was
Mm.
great, and
Well,
Alvarez pulled off the split decision. They dropped each other in the last round. I mean, you couldn't
yeah,
have
no,
asked for
the
a more poetic
and
finish to that fight.
again, there were another. They came up to the post fight press conference together, and commending each other. And Chad Mendes talked about how he's retiring, and Alvarez obviously seems to want another because that's something he's just seems to. I mean, fighting has been he's not called the Underground King for nothing. I kind of knew he would do well when he win this fight when they announced it, especially now with everything. And both of them kind of admitted, like for other fighters to hear them, like there's just something, the energy and the training. It's not as hard as MMA because you don't have to do as you obviously you just focus on the striking aspect and conditioning your hands, not every single nuance of fighting like mixed martial arts has. So I think that's why we're seeing so many like fighters, um maybe not even, I don't want to say over the hill or at the end of their careers, because the half of that main event for me, because Mike Perry's not an older guy. Like Mike Perry's in his prime, and for me, I honestly think if anyone's going to be, you know, whatever what George St. Pierre was to MMA or Fader, like if BKFC is going to have that guy now in the era, for me, that guy's going to be Mike Perry if it keeps going the way that he does. I know that was the last fight on his contract, but I don't, and I didn't see if there was any news that he renewed with them yet, but I hope he does renew with them.
I mean, where else is he going to go? Unless one of the other bare knuckle organizations,
Hmm.
offers him mega bucks. Like it seems like this is definitely his
Yeah.
his forte. I mean, you mentioned Mike Perry, so him and Luke Rockhold face head off in the main event. I mean, a good 2 rounds of action. I mean, a round and a half, whatever. I mean, I don't know what you can only expect so much in this. I mean, you literally got 5-second knockouts, 7-second knockouts. Most people were frustrated at the end because they got the impression that Luke Rockhold quit, which I
Mm.
guess technically he did. However, once you see the post-fight photos of his lip torn in half, his teeth rearranged, possible broken jaw. I don't know if that was ever confirmed or not, but I mean, just you look at it and you go, dude, the guy gave it. He went out there. He shot his shot at it. He landed some good punches. Um, but yeah, Mike Perry's just a dog, man. He's just a bulldog in there, and um, I think someone's gonna have to basically just put his lights out for him to almost lose one of these fights. Just because
Yeah.
he goes in there so hard. I
So
mean, he could lose a close decision, but I have a feeling like it's eventually. I don't think this is a sport of long winning streaks. I
mm.
obviously it's new enough where we don't really know yet.
If anyone could do it, I feel like he's the guy that can do it. You know what I mean? That like just the way he's been, especially the thing that won me over for him is in this type of fighting was his Triller fight. Where he almost got dropped, and he actually hinted at this when he spoke at the post event press conference. He was like, I kind of got to get hit a little. You got to hurt me a little to make me mad so I can come at you. And I think we've seen that in all of his fights. Like it's almost like I remember like when you look back at like Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell, there was one point in their fight when when they fought in their prime, where where Ortiz lands a decent shot on Liddell, and you could immediately see he's like, oh shit, I probably shouldn't have done that,
Yeah,
and he
yeah, yeah.
covers up, and Chuck Liddell just unloads on him. That's the vibe I got off of what happened and the way Perry fights. And the fact that he beat a bigger dude, that's one thing that he put as a feather in his own cap. In the post event press conference, he was just like, he wasn't taking Rockhold lightly because of his size and his reach and stuff. He was like, he was a legitimate threat. So for him, I mean, that was a victory for him. He seemed like when he mentioned his free agency, he definitely let the BKFC folks and Feldman know, like, I like what we're doing together. So, I mean, again, I've been so busy, I haven't been able to keep up on whether or not they announced that he's re-signed with them, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, and if they have to throw him some extra money, not the Ngannou money, but you know what I mean, like money to keep him happy and keep him around. I mean, Perry's not an idiot either. He said I have to talk it over with my team and my family too, because I mean it is bare knuckle. It still has the stigma of all the blood and guts and all that shit. But I just feel like, I mean, if he got a couple of more in there, and he could literally be like the face of bare knuckle, the sport, not just BKFC, but like you know
There's
he could
something there. I mean, he's got a chance
yeah.
at it. They're going to give him the opportunity if he wants to
Hmm.
take it. So, I mean, it could be a wild career turnaround for someone that seemed to be kind of washed out of MMA and on a
Hmm.
heavy journeyman status to now potentially being the face of an entire sport. Um, so yeah, the event was great. They follow up this Friday night, uh, BKFC 42 in Greenville, South Carolina, in Dr. John Lucas's neighborhood. So best of luck to John Lucas. Hopefully, he has a good night of work as the cut man and main, or not cut man, but main medical physician for the night, and everything goes well at that event. That's this Friday. Prelims kick off at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so a little bit hour earlier than the West Coast Midwest start. So 7 p.m. BKFC 42 this Friday night. Uh, Looks like a few good fights on the card. So yeah, BKFC finished on Saturday. Wednesday ended up at Invicta Fighting Championships 53. Um, Fun event, small event, bar basically. I ended up standing the whole event. Got there. Traffic kicked my ass. Ended up there after the very first fight, which isn't my forte, but in a foreign city, I got swamped there. Um, Obviously, the main event didn't end the way we wanted it to, but Jillian put up a hell of a fight. Riani dos Santos looks good, younger fighter. Um, it's part of the sport. Um, but
Yeah,
but
yeah,
overall, I mean, I there's no real way to sugarcoat it. Obviously, we were rooting hard for Jillian,
yeah.
but she
I
left it in the
was.
cage. You
Matt
know,
Hawkins, thirsty ass Matt Hawkins likes to go and take pictures with the champ right after. So,
hey, hey,
I
hey, I'm an
I
MMA
mean,
fan.
thirsty ass. I was like, when I saw it, I was like, come on, man. But I know you're a fan, and not for
I'm a fan
nothing.
of the sport.
It
I'm
was
not
a great. It
passing up
was
a
a great.
picture with the
I
champion.
just did that to break your balls.
Yeah, no, I know. I noticed. I figured that was coming, honestly. But I posted it. I thought Ed's gonna kick my ass for seeing you doing this.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I was gonna wait till I saw you to say something, but
no, it was.
it's the name of the game, and Jillian's aware of that, and like you said, it was a hell of a fight. There was questionable rounds there where I felt like shit. Jillian won some. It looked like there was moments where the new champ thought about like fatiguing, or it looked like she was
Mhm,
fatiguing. I
mhm.
felt like those leg kicks were working for Jillian. But there was just other, even that there's a point on the ground that I thought Jillian kind of had the advantage, and then it looked like Rand just found her I don't know, her second wind or something, was able to counter her counters, and it's actually a really great fight. I mean, midweek. Invicta cards, because of their midweek, they're not that big, because obviously folks aren't going to be up that late on a Wednesday night. But that fight was great, and then you had the fight with Olga Rubin hitting that buggy choke. Where you said you got there late, but you saw that one, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I got a picture with Olga after that fight. Had to get a picture with the first person I've ever seen pull off the buggy choke.
Mm.
So that was cool. That was the co-main event. I caught the vast majority of it. I walked in as they were announcing the winner of the first fight, which was of course the knockout. Um, but um, but yeah, I pretty much think exactly what you were saying about how I saw it from the crowd perspective. I had it 2-2 going into the fifth round for the championship fight.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that Dos Santos stole one of the rounds. I
Mm.
felt like there was one where, like, in the last 10, 20 seconds, she kind of reversed something on the ground, or I can't recall exactly. I think it was maybe the second round, maybe the third round. But by the third round, you
Mm-hmm.
could see fatigue starting to kick. It appeared fatigue
Mm-hmm.
was starting to kick in, and then obviously she got a little bit of a, you know,
I
energy.
mean, what's
She
crazy is that they both found like energy to keep going all the way to the end, which is what made it such a great fight. I think a rematch is definitely warranted, but well, I mean that's my opinion. Obviously, a little biased because of our relationship with Jillian, but I feel like a rematch is warranted just because she wasn't finished. It went the distance, and it went to the judges. So, if you want a convincing win, like you look at I mean, I know we're gonna move on to it, but when you look at the main event of one championship, they have Mighty Mouse and Marias had a finish. One guy finished the other. Second guy, there's two finishes, and then the third one was a decision, which that made more sense because they both finished each other before that. So I feel like if a rematch is at best 2 out of 3, like they do in the fighting video games, So I hope Lionheart gets another chance to get that belt back, because I mean, she worked just as hard as anybody else is trying to be a champion, and she literally she has a job and everything, like to become a champion at that level and still keep your day job and everything. I mean, who else does that? Stipe Miocic did
Yeah.
that. I can't
Well,
think of anybody
she was
else.
a champion. She is a champion.
Uh-huh.
She'll always be a champion. I don't know the divisional layouts of Invicta. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know the atom weight rankings and who's the next in line and so on and so forth. I do know that Del Boni was obviously one of the contenders, but she's
Mhm.
fighting in a higher weight class
Yeah.
now. So I feel like whether it's an immediate rematch or it's one fight down the line, I think Jillian literally is worst case one win away from having to get. I mean, she was the champion and lost like, two of the judges had it pretty wide. I think one judge had it 3 rounds to two. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna watch it if they fight again. It was a hell of a fight. I did not get
Mhm.
the opportunity to meet her, which was obviously disappointing. Um, as a fight fan, it's hard for me to necessarily know how to approach. One, she wasn't around a lot after the fight, but I just didn't. It wasn't an opportunity, and it's hard to approach somebody who's just laid their blood and guts
Yeah,
and
of
heart in the ring.
course.
And I don't. And as somebody who's never met her before, it wasn't the
Mm.
time. I didn't feel like it was the time, so I
Oh
let it
no,
slide
definitely not.
by it.
Yeah.
And I'll look forward to meeting her at one of her next fights in the future. But it was disappointing because I did want to shake her hand and hope to be congratulating her. But even before the event, I didn't see her walking around while a few of the other fighters were kind of, getting their tension out, walking around the crowd and
Hmm.
stuff. But I thought she put on a great fight. Invictus show overall was fun. Fairly fast paced as far as the fights go. There's not a big gap in between. Small venue. If they have it in Denver again, if anybody knows, it's in a real small venue, bar on each side, which is super convenient. Obviously, if you want to have a couple drinks or cocktails and watch the fights, and it's super intimate. I mean, you're literally in a place with maybe 200 people, 250 people. So it's not a big venue. It's like a little nightclub with the cage and the stage
It's
and the
real
bar.
works, right?
Yes, Real Works in Denver. So it seems to be their new kind of Denver home. I know they hinted on Twitter that they want to kind of bounce around a little bit, which hopefully they do. And I know you've been angling for an Atlantic City show for all
Yeah.
time and eternity, and I'd of
I know.
course
I
love
know
to
New
see them come
Jersey's
back to the
fucked up,
West
but like
Coast.
New Jersey's probably just hard for promoters to work with all their, just because of cost. But it would be nice. I mean, it would be somewhat local for Jillian, and there's a lot of fighters under, like she talks about Fatima. Fatima Klein could also, they could really rake in some tickets. I mean, they could do. I mean, I'm not expecting them to do Prudential Center, but I feel like Atlantic City is definitely more doable than a big,
Seems like there's
Uh,
got to be a theater or something out there.
hmm.
I mean, I've never been to Atlantic City, but if it's anything close to Vegas, there's got to be theaters
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff.
no, they have Ovation Hall, Boardwalk Hall.
There you go.
I mean, whatever the Hard Rock. I mean, Hard Rock has hosted MMA events. I know they do. I mean, they're
Mhm.
doing the ADCC and the Showboat this fall, so
There you go.
it's like
There you go.
there's
Yeah, many
plenty of
many
places.
opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, like I said, didn't go our way as cheering fans, but hell of a fight, fun event, buggy choke. I'd never seen one live, so that was extremely cool. That was Wednesday night. Friday night, as you mentioned, one a little bit earlier. I mean, I can't even say enough good things about the one
When
championship
when I
show.
when I watched the opener, that's when I messaged you. I was watching the opener and I was just like, it looks like I really wish I was there.
Yeah, I recorded the opener. I don't record a lot of video at the fights, but I recorded. Once I saw what was about to happen, I was like, "Oh man, this is
Did
just."
you post it anywhere? You got to post it
No, it's about a
somewhere.
5 minute video, and I don't pay for Twitter, so I'd have to
Uh,
break it down. I can do a couple of them, at least half the
yeah, chop
fighters,
it up
maybe
and put some
chop
up.
it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, just it's not Pride Fighting Championship. Pride Fighting
Mhm.
Championship is never coming back. As much as that hurts me to swallow,
Yeah,
Um, but
but
it
it was
felt as
close.
close as it
Yeah.
could to sitting in a
Oh
arena
man,
in an Asian marketplace.
if only they came a month later.
You know, um, the stage was spectacular. I mean, Bellator has a cool little stage. This thing was like, you know, the Academy Awards of MMA. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like it was you felt like you were watching an absolute spectacle. The
yeah.
laser lights off the ceiling, the laser lights shooting around, the
And there's people, again, like there's people that don't watch fights the way we watch fights that I talk to, that were talking to me about Stan Fairtex's finish, Rod Tang's finish. I'm just like, and of course, obviously, that I train with, that those grappling, they follow the grappling matches. I mean, the fact that they're on Amazon Prime and make it easily accessible. Chatri was talking about afterwards in the post fight event press conference, and he's a little hard to listen to in his press conferences. Just, I'm not going to lie, because of the way he overinflates a lot of things. But he says Amazon's happy with their numbers and they want to do more. He did say that they would be coming back again before the end of the year. If obviously their rule set, it's only in Colorado right now, but if other states see the success that they had, and these numbers that come out are more true than bragging, not fucking slap fight versus the NFL numbers, but you know what I mean, like the verifiable success numbers, then I feel like other states will be like, hey, we want to get a piece of that pie. I mean they did say, I follow them on LinkedIn too, and they did say they're opening an office or offices for at least creating content in New York, and I feel like that's kind of like a good segue for them to try to get at least this half of the country that I'm on, my coast, to try to get on board with that rule set. I don't think New York and New Jersey would do it because they're, let's be honest, they're a little soft when it comes to changing combat
New
sports.
Jersey is the state that literally took away grounded knees.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like it'd be probably be a long time coming, but maybe one of the Carolinas, somebody for Florida. I feel like everything goes in Florida, but someplace,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
here's the other angle, and I don't know. So there was no knees to the grounded head. There wasn't even one thrown the whole event. So that's kind of an odd,
Hmm.
thing to happen. So you really don't have to necessarily. I don't want them to get rid of the rule, but
Mm-hmm.
if they got offered, the theater at Madison Square Garden, and you
Yeah,
had to just not do grounded knees for an event to
yeah.
get
Like you
Rod
have to,
Tang
if
and
yeah.
those guys out there to showcase what they have, I think you probably bite the bullet on that one if I'm
Mm-hmm.
one championship. I do think that there's going to be states that'll open it up to it.
Yeah.
Um, I, I was on the Living Death podcast on Monday, and we didn't dive too deep into any of the topics we've talked about tonight. But I did mention that it
Why
was
don't you
probably.
marry them? You like them so much.
I did mention that I thought it was probably the most knowledgeable crowd that I've ever sat in to watch a combat sports event. To see the guy, I mean, I don't know. Like I said on the show, I said I don't know if everybody was just naive and like sponges to everything that was happening, or if everybody that showed up there just seemed to know their shit.
Hmm.
They knew, and Chatri, I guess, mentioned it in the post fight. I saw something on Twitter, I think last night, about this, where he
Yeah,
was shocked to see that like
yeah.
the people knew his fighters. Um, you
Rod
had
Tang was the biggest one. Even
people were
Rod Tang was
dancing in
like,
the crowd for Rod Tang.
yeah,
I mean, you had people chanting Mikey, Mikey
Musumeci.
over and over
Yeah.
again for the Musamechi. Um, there was people sitting behind me from Pakistan, down the aisle from Yemen. I had people from Vietnam sitting in front of me. There was people from Mexico, Brazilian flags. It was like the most international event that I've ever been to, bar none.
Hmm.
As far as just being such a mix of crowd and everybody being so happy and
Hmm.
cheering on their countrymen. I did that was kind of cool too. Like the ring announcer doesn't announce the city you're from. You're
Hmm.
from the United States. You're from
Yeah, yeah,
Vietnam. You're from China. Like it made it feel kind of Olympic-esque as far as just
yeah,
hearing that.
yeah.
Um,
I never even thought about that. They always do that
like
too.
and when you have a card where you have Kazakhstan, and I mean you have there's just there had to have been, without, I'm guessing there was 10 countries represented, on the card, and that might even be low, um, for the 22, fighters that fought. But it was fun. It was
Yeah.
fun. It was the heartbeat that they play over the crowd. I had never heard that. I never picked that up when I watched it on TV. But the subtle heartbeat that is going, like they play like a heartbeat, and it speeds up at times, and it's just kind of subtle in the background. It doesn't distract from the fight, but it adds this like blood sport kind of like
Yeah.
feel to it, a little bit.
I
And
wonder if there's research done on that on purpose, because I mean, it seems to work well with the crowd. They always have very lively crowds, and like you said, I didn't even know that. I never really paid any mind to it.
I had no idea until like the second fight of the night, third fight of the night. My buddy goes, "Oh, this heartbeat's crazy," and I go, and it, like all of a sudden, then I could focus on it as opposed, and it kind of was like, "Oh wow, I didn't even." It was so subtle, but it's like now that I know it's there, it's really kind of a cool
Hmm.
cool atmosphere for the event, and you know, um, the VIPs there, just seeing them bring out like trays of sushi and
Oh wow, they
drinks.
had sushi.
Oh, they had like yeah, there was probably like 25 waiters and waitresses that
Holy
in between
shit!
the fights would like swarm the
Might,
VIP, like the
might have
people
to
around
open
the
up the
ring,
pockets for that one.
like would
Excellent.
swarm the people around the ring with trays of
I know. I
drinks.
like you like to go as a fan. I wonder what the how they had treated media.
I didn't even
Unfortunately,
see media. I didn't see media row
I,
or anything
I,
like
I
that.
did. I some of the folks that I do talk to, like apparently they didn't have the best seats, but I mean, I feel like if I was gonna do something like that, I would want to go as a fan, just because it seems so it seems so just crazy, like you want to soak it all in.
Like something you wouldn't want to miss. Yeah, I mean, it was really like that. It was like okay, like, and immediately like you're going, okay, they sold out every seat. The crowd's going wild. Like if I'm signing with that arena for like 3 events a year, and I'm going there every 4 months, and I'm selling it out, and I'm building my brand. If you know, obviously, if you get offered these bigger states, you make the move, or bigger cities, I should say, even.
Hmm.
But it was like the perfect storm for them. Like I've seen Demetrius. Watch Demetrius Johnson fight Cejudo in the UFC, and the cheers he got by a crowd 1/4 the size or a third the size. I mean, to hear people chanting his name, to
Hmm.
see him come down that ramp, like, I feel like, he might have been thinking it was a retirement fight going into that fight, but I don't think he could have came down that ramp, heard his name cheered, heard that crowd have, 90% for support for the dude, and then go, no, I'm done with this. To
Yeah,
me, like he does okay, like I can literally fight in the United States. I don't have to travel to Singapore.
yeah,
I can in my older, end of my career, I can fight 2, 3, 4 more times in the United States over the next 2, 3 years. And and this is how the crowd's gonna treat me, and one's gonna pay me, and I can
how did
stack
you
belts.
when he asked the crowd if they wanted him to retire? I'm curious what your reaction was.
Well, I mean, I didn't get vocal, but I don't want him to retire for the sake of Mighty Mouse helping one grow.
Mm.
There is a small selfish part of me that was like, I kind of wouldn't mind saying I got to see his last fight.
Because it looked
Uh,
like a lot of folks wanted him to keep fighting.
yeah, oh, the vast majority of the
Yeah.
crowd and the people and me. But like I
Mm.
said, there's 2% of me that's like, well, if it wasn't rooting for him to retire, but it was like, if this is his last fight, I'm glad I'm here.
Mhm.
One of those kind of moments. I mean, you mentioned Mendez retiring. Like, it's just a weird coincidence. I was at his retirement fight for MMA against
Mhm.
Volkanovski, and now I'm at his combat fighting retirement. Which,
Mm.
not being a huge Mendez fan, but it's like, dude, like I got to see you from start to finish and
Yeah.
literally till your finish line. So
Yeah.
as a fan in the arena, watching some of these guys who are older and full, I mean,
Yeah.
Fedor's
What
retirement. I mean, I feel like I've been through a run of guys just,
what's
hanging them
what
up.
like you mentioned, it's crazy because with the similarity between the two events and the two fighters that you just mentioned, they both they both said, even at the and again at the post fight press conference, both of them were like, it's not something that they're going to do alone. They're going to discuss with their families first, and then see, if financially it makes sense for them to keep fighting. And one thing about Mighty Mouse that even my own jiu-jitsu instructor, who's been in a warm-up room with him back when he was cornering Ricardo Romero when he was fighting in the UFC, they shared a warm-up room together, and my instructor came back and told us all how, as good as Mighty Mouse is, and back then he was like still like he was younger in his prime career, like, he not as legendary as he is now, but even back then, my instructor comes all the way back to New Jersey from Vegas, and he's just like, I just can't believe how coachable the guy is. I mean, his mind, the way his mind works, nothing he does is by accident. He's just the way he fights is the way he seems to do everything, and I don't, I think he definitely deserves the time to think about it, and if I don't know how much money one lost holding that event, especially with the bonuses they gave out. But because I mean, I'm used to their $50,000 bonuses, but I rather Rotang got 100,000, and I forget, didn't someone else get 100,000? I forget who. I have to look at
Unless
the
they gave it to Mighty Mouse, but no, there was definitely a handful of
yeah,
50,000.
yeah.
I mean, I think we get a little bit skewed by the UFC being cheap as hell.
Hmm.
Like the UFC should be giving
Hmm.
out like $500,000 bonuses,
Yeah,
based off the amount of money they're making. Like the
yeah.
$50,000 thing is a nice chunk of money, but it
Hmm.
ain't putting these. If these companies got the sponsors, the gate for that arena, the tickets weren't super cheap. They were
Hmm.
competitive priced,
Hmm.
so you're maximizing your gate. Um, but just a fun show. If Mighty Mouse
Yeah.
retires,
Uh,
it's a hell of a
uh,
way to go out. But I just feel like there's too much there for him right now.
yeah. And
Like,
one last thing I'll say before we move on to the Bellator 296 preview for this weekend. One thing I want to say is like it was crazy. It's crazy how many people had the same sentiment as because of how good that card was, and kind of like saying the UFC better like wake up and smell the coffee and stop doing this wash, rinse, and repeat. I forget. I wish I remember who the post was. Someone put a post and it was kind of like a of course it was trolling other promotions a little bit, but some of it made sense to me, and I'm not remembering it word for word, but it was like, one is for the fans, PFL's for the fighters, UFC is for the corporate overlords,
yeah.
and Bella. I mean, like Bellator. I forget that they had something bad to say about Bellator, but
I don't think you could have possibly went to the BKFC show or the one show
mm-hmm,
and then go to the UFC event this weekend and not be disappointed.
mm,
Like I don't see how barring the greatest fights and maybe the most violent night of action and flying arm bars and
mm-hmm,
craziness beyond crazy. Like I can't even picture how anything the UFC is doing on these fight night cards could
mm-hmm,
compare to what I witnessed those two nights in Denver. I mean,
yeah,
it was just that, I mean, and then the UFC comes out today with their schedule, and you're like, geez, like
mm-hmm,
there's a long 9-week haul there. There's a couple good events, but Holly Holm
mm-hmm.
main eventing against somebody I don't even know. Like, I mean, we're hurting, and it's the international fight week card is solid, but seeing people lose their minds, call it a 10 card, like I sure feel like we've
Mm-hmm.
been brainwashed to believe that what is a 10 card now used to be, it's a 10 now. It was a 7.5. Not
Yeah,
not all that long ago.
yeah.
What do we got? Kevin Nielsen chipping in. I missed.
Yeah, he said Mighty Mouse was one of the first fighters I remember talking about how he integrated rehab into his fight training after his shoulder surgery ahead of his time. Really, I mean, yeah. I mean, he's just again like my instructor was the one that kind of turned me on to how smart he is, and I mean that's what made me watch him more. And when I remember watching all his fights after the fact, even when Ricardo was out of the UFC, and I was watching all his fights after the fact, and I remember I was with my ex in a bar once, and it was one of the pay-per-views that he headlined, and everybody started like leaving when his fight was on, and in my mind I was like, "What are you doing? This is one of the best fucking fighters on the planet." And that's back when people for some reason didn't like the 125-pound division, like they never watched the old school Tuesday night boxing fights when the little guys used to box.
I was
And those
guilty of
fights
it
used to be
too, though.
fire.
To me, it was. I was guilty of that as
Mm,
well. But
yeah, I
not a
don't know.
single person left that fight early for the
Yeah,
from that Mighty Mouse fight. So that's
yeah.
what I'm saying. Like it was just it was for me. It was like the first time in his life that I've seen and
Hmm.
witnessed it that like
Like he's getting to what he deserves.
he's getting what he deserves, and I
Yeah.
just wonder if he's selfless enough to walk away right now when there's a
Hmm.
chance to kind of stick it to like what I
Hmm.
mean, like get your face on some billboards. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I wonder if that's there, and it certainly won't hurt his Twitch and all that other stuff. Like if
Yeah.
you're gonna
I think it was when they first started doing when they announced it, I forget, he did an interview he was in New York City. It was recently, and he did I think it was with Esquire magazine, and the person like even talks about how they go someplace, to sit down and eat to do the interview. And the person writing the interview says, "I'm with one of the greatest martial artists on the planet, and a world champion, and we're walking around, and nobody knows who he is." And I feel like now, especially after that event, if they didn't know who he was, they better know who he is now. Maybe one get one or two in, if he wants to, but I don't think we should blame him if he doesn't want to.
No, no, but hell of an event. Main event was not the most exciting fight, but that was the only like slight takeaway from the show. I had it basically as a 10, and then I ended
Mm-hmm.
up ranking it at about an 8.5
Yeah,
9,
but
because of the not it just when you have a fight where two guys knocked each other out, there's always that potential for a
yeah,
little bit of hesitation.
and the other thing too is like the as many times if these guys fight each other enough times, they get to know each other's well enough,
Mhm.
and you cross hands enough times, and it gets to a point that you're just like, yeah, what are we going to surprise each other with now? You know what I mean? So I didn't mind that it went to a
It didn't
decision.
completely
Yeah.
surprise me. I kind of thought that that's what might happen, but I'm
Hmm.
just saying, as far as like, if that fight had ended in something spectacular, that card would have been off the, that would have been 11 out of a 10. That
Hmm.
there was, the Ritter grappling match was slow, but other than though that,
Yeah,
like,
one quick comment about that. I enjoyed because that match. I think we got an answer. I know they I don't. I'm a little like I was a little skewed on the decision of that. I found Ty to be a little apprehensive. I mean, rightfully so because he knows Dorito's got a nasty Darce choke. So every time, it's funny because every time he got an overhook. I'm sorry, I might be when he got because Dorito kept every time he got an underhook and Dorito went for his overhook, Ty would retreat his arm, which is smart because that's how you not get Darce choked. So he was obviously aware of it. I know in the post fight press conference he said he wanted to go after his goal is to eventually work his way up the ladder and kind of like get to Gordon Ryan, beat him, and then do MMA. But watching the side, I feel like he's not going to do unless he trains more with big guys like that are good at jiu-jitsu. I feel like we're going to get more matches like that. But I mean, credit to the kid for one. It's for aiming so high. I mean, you don't know if you don't try. So I mean, if he succeeds, then of course I'll eat my words.
yeah. So that brings us to the fresh stuff for this week. We mentioned BKFC on Friday. Also, earlier on Friday, I believe one is it 1 Eastern or is it 4 Eastern? The start time, I got it right here in front of me. I
For
don't know why.
Bellator,
Oh, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. So it's an
yeah, because they're in
early
Paris.
breakfast with Bellator in
So yes, you
Paris.
are talking about Bellator. Okay, all
Yes,
right.
yes. You know, it's not the greatest card of all time, but there's a couple potential bangers
I
on
don't know
here.
about that, man. I mean, it's a pretty. I wouldn't
It's a
say
good
nothing.
card. It's one of their better Paris cards,
Yeah.
and obviously it's got one of the, one of my goats, Gegard Mousasi,
Hmm.
in the main event against Fabian Edwards, along with
Re-
Brent Prentice.
really quick before we look at the main card, I
Yeah,
just
there you
want to
go.
make sure
There are some
folks.
names on the prelims.
I want to make sure folks know about this fight that got moved that me and Nolan King, where we had talked about it, and I forget what other card that it got moved from. Just want to make sure it's still on there. It's a pretty big prelims. So if you have access to YouTube at around 11:30 a.m. Eastern, you definitely want to keep your eye on this fight right here: Oliver Enkamp versus Luca Poklit. So Poklit was the one that Nolan King and I liked, the Lucanator. We talked about submission of the year. And then Oliver Enkamp is a guy that got the not a buggy choke triangle inverted triangle in his fight. So I'm really looking forward to this fight finally happening. Definitely, it's probably going to turn into a kickboxing match, but both guys are. It looks like folks are leaning Enkamp to win it, but definitely going to be. If I mean the hardcore fans, if you're a fan of Bellator's fighters, this is definitely one you want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Sal Rogers also on the prelims.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Denise Keelholtz, prelim.
Yves Landu.
Yeah. But obviously the names that jump out at me are the top three fights of this fight card:
Mm-hmm.
Douglas Lima against Venstinas. Um, I don't know how you see this. I kind of, Lima's one of those guys again who, like, I mean, I love watching Lima fight. I thought
Mm-hmm.
there was a time when I argued he might have been the best welterweight in the world. Unfortunately, now he's on a 4-fight losing streak,
Mm-hmm.
although against four legitimate top tier opponents in Bellator. I'm a little nervous for this fight. Vincenus is a heavy hitter,
Yeah,
and I wonder if
those Dutch strikers. Yeah.
yeah, and I kind of have a feeling like this might be Limo's swan song here, and um, we could potentially be seeing the end of a hell of a career, at
Yeah.
least in Bellator.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's one that's one I want to stay away from for that very reason. The one that I'm actually really excited about is this one here, Brent Primus versus Mansour Barnoui. Primus wasn't initially in the Grand Prix, and then I can't even remember who fell out that they inserted Primus in. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on that, but when that happened, I was like, no, better. Brent Primus should be in it. Um, underrated ground game. Again, I always call him the original calf kicker because he's the one that made Michael Chandler's leg go funky in the Madison Square Garden with a calf kick. So I'm excited for this fight. I'm actually rooting for him to win just because I've been watching him for a while. And it looks like the fans got Barnoui as a favorite, but I disagree with that. I might have to check the odds on that. put a little cheddar cheese on Primus.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be curious what the odds are. I think it's going to be a good fight. I think Primus has a bigger punch, but Barnui is a submission expert. Um, oh, interesting that the crowd lean heavy towards Barnui.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go with the favorite to win by submission, but I do think that's a little skewed there. The 78% seems
Mm-hmm.
a little bit on the high side, and like you said, might be worth looking at the odds
Yeah.
to put some on Primus or Primus. Yeah, and then the main event. I mean, everything that could be said has been said about Gegard Mousasi.
Yeah.
The guys fought everybody. The guys fought weight classes. 3 weight classes. Really 4 if you want to count him fighting super heavyweights. Um, but I mean, the guy is just a stud. Fabian Edwards coming off of a couple wins, including a finish of Lyoto Machida.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going with Musasi. I've kind of been off on his pick. When he lost the title, and then I picked against him the fight before that. So I've
Yeah.
been off, but I think he wins this fight. I think he's just a better fighter, and
Yeah.
I think he's hungry probably for a big win here.
Yeah. I don't know about hungry because of just the way having talked to him a few times when he's been out here for me in New York, and just his whole
Still got to eat
weird
though.
vibe.
You still
Yeah.
got to eat, even if you're quiet. You still got to eat. I
Yeah.
think he probably sees maybe potential for a last title shot
Hmm.
on the horizon. With a win
Yeah.
here, he probably gets the title fight, gets a chance to get his belt back, get a chance
Yeah.
to get revenge. A loss here puts him. He's not a spring chicken. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how many. And he's fought. What are we looking at? 58 times, 59 times.
Yeah.
Officially 59. Who knows how many in reality?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
just a true sportsman and one of the greats of this sport, and somebody, if I was trying to get somebody in this sport 10 years down the line from now, I'd say Google Gegard Mousasi
Mhm.
and watch
Yeah.
some of his fights.
Yeah, and 69% of the fans on Bellator.com seem to think Musasi is going to win. I obviously do not disagree with that or you. So that's your Bellator 296 card. I'm glad Bellator's back. I mean, it's going to be early. I'll probably still be working, but I'll definitely catch it on the replay if I don't get to catch it. The main card starts 4 p.m. my time Eastern. That's a really big preliminary card. That's why it starts so early. And again, I'm hoping I can find some way to catch the that one match on the prelims. Denise Kielholtz is on there. It's a really good card, so don't sleep on an early card on Friday.
Yep. So there's that early BKFC in the early evening, and then as I mentioned earlier, if you're really looking for that triple header late night, you got Epic Fighting, epicfightinglive.com to watch
Mr.
John Brumley,
Brumley.
our boy. I noticed he changed his name. I think it's on Tapology. It says Just Bleed now. So I want to give John
Just
Just Bleed
bleed
Brumley.
Brumley.
Yep, appears to be the nickname. So
All right.
kind of made me chuckle when I saw that.
Yeah, I like it. I like. Oh, we got to get him back. Win or lose, we got to get him back just to talk about that. Just bleed Brumley. I love it.
Uh, so so yeah, until then, fans can check out the show at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me, Matthew Hawkins, at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter, Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. And again, as always, you can check out our podcast at allaccessmma.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good rest of your night, Ed, and look forward to this weekend's fights.
Yep. We'll see you week after next.